Actually, on the way here, speaking of music, I was listening to the most recent episodes of Political Beats with Philip Wegman.
Wow.
The National.
The National.
Which all the kids love.
Yes, all the kids love so the reason I listened to it was because, well, not only because you were going to be on the show, but because Nick Rowan is in town briefly. He didn't tell me until yesterday, and then he showed up and ended up crashing on my couch.
Hey, what's new?
What's new with Nick?
Did you give him the right address?
Dude, you cannot even. I want you to guess right now how many times Shad has asked me what my address is to give to a guest in a chat that has the address in it that many times as well. Like, you would be astounded.
It's nearly double digits.
Yeah, it's nearly double digits at this point. You'd think 5'11's not too hard to remember, but 5'12 on such an important guest.
Like, just remember your height.
Yes. I'm 6 foot. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's the case for me, though. That makes sense. Yeah. That's why it's so easy for me and so hard for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But no, we were talking about the National yesterday, and we were talking specifically about how it was sort of the dark underbelly of the Obama years, is sort of the way that we felt from it. You know, where it has this melancholy, where you kind of can feel the post-Obama malaise sort of kind of happening, but just, you know, predominantly among people who are contractors in Northern Virginia. Like, that sort of demographic of guy seems to be pretty heavily represented with it. But I was surprised by how, you know, you guys were very effusive. You definitely seemed like you really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I it was a band that I was not terribly familiar with, which I made clear on the podcast. Neither was Jeff.
Yeah.
But I really get, you know, I get why people like them. I get the trajectory of the career.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about the last album turning it over to female vocalist for most of it. I guess there's a new album on the way. I saw last week. They're teasing a new album.
I imagine they got a little more in them. That's for sure. The National, for me, at least, kind of like in our zeitgeist, was sort of a thing that people, when we were in college, kind of got into. When what's the record? The one that is Sleep Well Beast with The System Only Dreams in Total Darkness.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. That came out, and, you know, there was a bit of a resurgence, and all these people who, you know, had been listening since Trouble Will Find Me, which for our age range was a big deal.
Yeah. True. That's a lifetime.
We didn't have very many people who were very conscious in 2005 enough to be listening to Alligator.
Very scary to have albums that you think about from your college years now getting like 25th anniversary treatments.
Yeah.
People in college are not
It's no
even old
good.
enough. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Oh,
That's only going to get worse. That's the thing, right? Well, you know, it's also when bands that you grew up listening to are on nostalgia circuit. You know,
Yeah, when they're starting to
Playing
play
the state fairs.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
exactly it.
county fairs.
Yeah.
Street festivals.
You know, the funny thing is, though, is that for us, even at our age, that happens. Like, I remember when I worked at the county fair my sophomore year of high school, and Three Doors Down was playing at the county fair. And I was like, well, you know, this is technically a band from our youth.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Though we were still in it, still in the prime.
Yeah, the butt rock to nostalgia circuit thing was much quicker.
Much like the new metal to nostalgia circle.
But at some point you graduate, because like Poison at some point was on the state fair, county fair circuit, and now they've graduated back to Sheds because they're Poison. They're Brett Michaels.
Yes, there is a.
They can play the big theaters again.
You can push through it. You can push through it, and then, you know, there's also the new thing where, you know, for all that it's major ills that it's caused the music industry, TikTok has resulted in all these random bands becoming viral again, and then selling out shows. Like Evanescence tours now, like headlines. You know,
That's beautiful.
That was another great
I love that.
nostalgia circuit band. Deftones are now selling out arenas. You know,
No way.
and it's, well, you know, you can't really predict any of that. It's just
I
enough
wonder
people with
if-
too much eyeliner make enough videos on the internet, and all of a sudden people are buying tickets again.
I wonder if Smash Mouth still sells out concerts, because to me they are the premier meme band. Like, you know,
Well, they have a new lead singer, you know.
Yes, because that guy had a meltdown on stage, right?
Ooh.
Did he hurt somebody?
I don't think.
Was it racist? Was it anti-COVID?
I
Like,
think
what was
it was
he
just
doing?
incoherent.
Yeah.
I don't think
Okay,
there was
yeah.
any physical activity involved.
all right, look it
Yeah.
up, bud. What happened?
What happened to John Smashmouth? Whatever his name
Goodness,
is.
yeah. I mean, the one video I have seen of Smash Mouth performing was during All Stars. People would throw loaves of bread on stage, just like a bunch of bread. I don't know exactly why. I don't know what the joke is there, because I don't remember bread being referenced in the song.
Are we gonna read a transcript of?
No. Oh, okay. Yep. I think he said, "I'll effing kill your whole family. I swear to God." So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Threat of violence.
Yeah. That's pretty rough. Though he
know.
does look like a 35-year-old dad in that.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like the Offspring. The Offspring is my favorite band like that, where they're still touring and they all look. They're just fat and still have frosted tips and they're just up there. And they're like, oh.
Well, he's a PhD,
Yes, I've heard this.
He's a doctor.
Yeah. Well, and isn't
Astrophysics or something.
Is it the guitar? It's the guitarist or the bassist. His name is Noodle or something like that, and he's also.
I don't know
a man
about
of
his
some
credentials.
Yes, excuse me. We gotta have there should be an Offspring symposium. They should do some sort of collection of their intellectual works, I guess.
There you go. In fact, I think that if any podcast worth its salt should have an expert in the Offspring specifically sitting in the corner and fact checking at all times, right?
Yeah,
You know,
that's why there's so
such
many
complex-
producers in podcasting now who are stoners. Because those are
They've
the
got that knowledge.
those are
They
the
got
only
it
kind of
unlocked.
guy where you can look at him in the corner and say, "Yeah, what are the Offspring up to?" They'll give you a direct answer. Cool. Well, for folks, at this point, we've probably already started. In studio today, we have Scot Bertram of Hillsdale College fame, of WRFH fame, of Rockville fame, depending on,
Rockford.
Rockford.
Yeah.
I thought it
Wow.
was Rockville.
Rockville is an REM song.
Oh, okay. Yes,
Ah,
you're right.
yeah.
So there you
Rockford.
go.
Yes.
There is a Rockford, Illinois. There's a Rockford, Michigan. There's a
Yes.
Rockford, Ohio, and I think there's also a Rockford, Iowa. So,
Okay. So Rockford, Illinois,
yeah.
home of Cheap Trick.
There you go. And Scot Bertram. So, I mean, there you go.
Not home of, just at one time lived there.
That's right. Yeah.
Came up within.
Do you
right?
consider yourself a Chicagoan, or are you just a suburbanite, like in your mental construction?
We were so close to Chicago, and at that point, it wasn't as delineated as it is now, probably. Some people who grew up in Chicago do get mad at you when you say
Yeah.
you're from Chicago.
I
And like,
bet.
where? And well, 20 miles southwest.
Yeah.
But I made it to Comiskey Park in 22 minutes and downtown in 28. So it's
Nice,
I
okay.
feel like it's
There you
I feel
go.
like it's
Yeah,
close.
you have a better claim than we do to being
Yeah.
from Seattle or
Yeah.
something like that.
No,
And also
I
a
mean,
much
and you
better-
you can't even get to Jackson that fast from here.
Yes.
So,
True.
I mean, we're in the greater Jackson area. So.
We've had people on the show actually who I think are much more willing to claim Chicago status for much more strenuous reasons. Dean Sinclair being one of them. who-
Yes, and Brant Cohen, of
and
course.
Brant Cohen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I hesitate too because I've never lived in Chicago. I lived very close southwest suburbs. It was in Hickory Hills for a very little while when I was very, very young, in Westmont and Darien, and so southwest suburbs right on I-55. But I never lived in Chicago, and the only time that I really stayed in Chicago was I had a friend who had a place up on Belmont, kind of near Wrigley, west of there, like Belmont and Southport, and I hated it. I hated being there.
Yeah.
How long were you there?
I just stayed overnight a few times.
Yeah,
on
yeah,
weekends.
That's enough. Yeah.
And that's enough.
Because
busy all the
Dean's
time,
apartment
lights
is like really right across the way from Wrigley Field,
No, you
right?
say it's literally
Yeah.
on the main
Yeah,
drag there.
I cannot imagine the insanity of a game day there. Like,
I feel like,
how late would you have to stay up
Well,
just
you know
to?
how sometimes when you go to
avoid the
to a
noise.
men's room, they have that sticker that's like make sure that people don't splash urine because they're just peeing on the sticker of a fly or something, right? You should just have buckets out that are just vomit, places, so that the average person who's going to be walking by, rather than throwing up on your stoop, is going to be throwing up in this bucket.
Yeah,
because
camouflage smoke screens.
yes,
That's what's necessary.
I mean,
to survive.
it's not Philly, but it's still
rough.
Still a little rough.
Well, I mean, I feel like we need to get Dean Sinclair's opinion on this.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, he would be the expert.
yes.
Yeah.
So it was.
Give him a call, Josh.
Yeah.
Go on, let him know.
Was it the noise that put you off? It's the noise.
It's the noise. I think,
Yeah.
The neighborhoods down by, Comiskey Park, Sox Park, are more neighborly.
Yeah, there you go.
You could see yourself being down there, but for people who are just out of college, that's so far removed from
Where the party's
where
at.
the party's at. They don't want to.
Yeah.
We don't want to live there. That's where you go when you have when you're about to have a kid, maybe.
Yeah.
And it's sort of that nice little pocket around the park.
Yeah.
And tree-lined streets, and game day traffic is heavy, but other than that, you're not going to have a lot of stuff going through.
Yeah.
But that was a big part of it.
And this is for Stock Stadium.
Yeah, down in Bridgeport, and also to get to Wrigley from where I'm from, the southwest suburbs, it's impossible. It's impossible. You got to go, 55 to Lakeshore Drive and come back the other way, or it's just
So
silly.
I've driven in
And then when I got there, this is literally not a joke. I spent more time looking for a parking space than I did driving to get there.
Yes, well, there wasn't just guys standing around with those big signs and say parking $5 or something along those lines that you could rely on.
Nothing like that.
No, and you do not want to give them the satisfaction, right,
of having owned the parking spot. Yeah, I've driven in a lot of major cities, and by far I feel like, other than getting lost in the various river crossings in DC, driving the Loop is one of the most nefarious.
No, see, I don't have any problem.
You don't have a problem with the Loop?
My wife does. You know, she's just.
Is she from the area?
She's from Rockford. Well, she's from a small town outside of Rockford.
Yeah.
No stoplight.
So in the same way that you were Chicagoan, she's a
Rockford. Yeah, it's actually pretty close.
Yeah.
She can't stand to drive downtown, and I have no problem with it. The scariest place I ever have driven is Miami. And going, because we were down for the Super Bowl, and so going from Miami to Fort Lauderdale, the hotels up to the stadium, and those people are insane.
Like Florida drivers,
lanes don't mean anything.
Yeah,
to them, both in terms of usage and speed. Like it's not fast and then slower and then slow. It's any speed you want.
At all times.
I feel like that has to be a weird convergence of the average age of the average Florida driver, and like also people being from second world countries. Like a lot of people from Cuba, a lot of people from Puerto Rico. People. Driving is different. Out there. So.
Well, my favorite Florida driving story was my father-in-law told me of taking a shuttle from his hotel to the cruise port.
Yeah,
and got to an intersection. Every time there was no turn on green, so it was all 3 lanes on one side, 3 lanes on the other. You had to cross those 3 lanes, and they went by 2 cycles of the light without being able to turn left. And so finally, the shuttle driver pulled up and just crossed across the entire 3 lanes and just stopped there, and everybody's honking. Nobody can move it. He says, "Hey, this is Florida, baby. This is just what happens," which is do to me.
You do have to have a certain level of, I don't know.
Yeah. Insanity,
right? Which is, I don't know. Speaking of that noise thing, though, with Chicago, my wife and I visited her sister in New York the other day, and you look at a New Yorker, and this is something that I didn't really notice until this time I was in New York, but everybody I would talk close to, their eyes would be like red. Like it was, you'd be like, you haven't slept well in a really long time, right? Like you're in your room, and like we were like in the Lower East Side, not quite Times Square, but nearby. So like not quite Chinatown, next to Chinatown, and like a quiet part of the city, ostensibly, and 3 noise machines, a fan, all of this, and we could not sleep.
It's certain kinds of noise too, because when I worked in Chicago, I lived in Lisle, which is a western suburb, right on the train tracks. My apartment complex was on the train tracks. I went up a flight of stairs. I was at the train station, which was perfect.
Yeah.
Except for the train.
There's a lot of that didn't bother me at all.
Really?
That was really actually kind of soothing, and
I'm surprised.
I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
And it's like the scene from Blues Brothers when Elwood Blues falls right asleep because he lives under the L. He knows what to expect. It's sort of the life noise 24 hours a day that drove me nuts. The cars and the honking and the door slamming and the people shouting. That's hard to deal with.
I mean, we not even joking, twice witnessed like a hit and run happen. And then, of course, everybody's getting out of their cars or yelling at each other and whatnot. It's like, well, I can't, In D.C., I watched a guy get stabbed, and that was way less disruptive than what it was like in New York City. So,
it wasn't Julius Caesar in the park.
No. It was a real stabbing. Though it was non-lethal, so I didn't watch a guy die, but it's actually a very funny story. But I don't think
it sounds like it, Shad.
Yeah,
really setting it up to be hilarious.
Not the kind of story I want to tell right here, right now.
That's Patreon exclusive.
Yeah, Patreon exclusive potentially. That's for another time for sure.
In fact, that's a story that you should tell with Joe Papalardo.
Yes,
next time that comes
reoccurring.
Yes.
Reoccurring guest.
Dude, Shad, this show's actually about something. Did you know that?
Yeah, that's what people are telling me.
Yeah, people have been writing in the journals and such and saying, did you know
the trade papers?
Yeah, that Monomaniacs is actually about
Talkers
something.
Magazine.
Yeah. Turns out this show, Monomaniacs, what we do is we bring somebody on, a guest, and they talk about their monomaniacal obsession, the thing they've been really into recently, right?
Yes.
The thing they can't stop thinking about. we're not really interested in hearing about like, the concept of greed or, my obsession of my neighbor's mule, like that kind of a thing.
Or for the original Monomaniac, a white whale of some size.
Yes,
right?
exactly. No. What we're looking for is what kind of like, weird concept are you into right now? What kind of hobby you're into right now? And so we brought Scott on to talk about his. Scott, what is your monomaniacal obsession today?
So you're both in luck and out of luck.
Okay,
which is what I tell my wife all the time. Because my work is my hobby and my hobby is my work. Right? And so that is really what I'm focused on essentially all the time, nonstop. But there is something that's been on my mind quite a bit, and it's based on part of what I'm doing at work. And I'll give it the big wind-up here, which is, for those who don't know, at Hillsdale, there's a program called the Collegiate Scholars Program. And the idea is these one-credit courses each term, and they're cross-departmental, so you take a little of this and a little of that, and they're kind of fun. Some of them are fun. All of them are fun. All of them are fun.
Come on. We're not saying any particular professor.
So Dr. Carrington is not listening to this right now.
But the idea is they're out of the ordinary. And so, I've done some of these, and I'm about to do my fourth. And the first one I did a couple of years ago, I did the Twilight Zone in Cold War America.
Yes.
Which was really cool.
Great concept. Yeah.
And last school year, I did songs of patriotism and protest because the theme is a theme each year, and the theme was revolution. And so, as you guys know, you're Political Beats fans. Big music, devotee, passionate about it. So, songs of patriotism and protest, 1960 to present. Very neat. Yeah. And then Dr. Eric Hutchinson, who runs the program, decided that this year's theme was going to be humor after I told him that I had a humor-based idea, but I didn't want to do it for a couple of years because I was going to be really busy. And then he made the theme humor, so I got to come back and do these.
Yes, exactly.
So in the fall, I did the political humor of Saturday Night Live.
Yes. There you go. That's a great concept.
And I'm prepping, and this is what I'm really into right now, and also into because we did an episode recently for Political Beats, is I'm doing Weird Al Yankovic Cultural Critic in the spring.
Okay.
And
all right.
If you're paying attention, there's a theme to these courses that I do. These one-credit courses. We meet 14 times, actually 13 times this term because of the travel day on the day after Easter. But 13, 14, 50-minute-long classes. You can't get too intense with it. And all of them have to deal with this very current past.
Yes.
Very recent past.
The way that I would actually kind of describe it is just Gen X America. Sort of.
And one of the reasons I do that is because it's not, I know it is not just Hillsdale students, but that era of person doesn't have the knowledge of the things that just happened before they were born.
Yes. The great historical blind spot.
Yes. Right. It's right there because you go through grade school, high school, and you're into the 1700s and the Revolution and the Civil War and World War I, World War II, get through 45, you probably get through the Bush years maybe, and then you run out of time. There's not enough time. And so it's this very recent past that is a big blind spot. And I first noticed this when I was teaching, and I'd say, who remembers this person? Who knows this singer? Or who knows this? And nobody did. And not fringy, very well-known people. There's no idea whatsoever.
I was thinking about this specific thing the other day. John Kerry, specifically, is a kind of guy who I bet no current Hillsdale student would have a really constructed view of who exactly John Kerry was.
Even though he's actually still theoretically in the public spotlight, right?
Still doing stuff.
And so I found that students had no recollection of what had happened just before they arrived on this earth. And that concerned me because a lot of my life growing up was preparing for what I wanted to do. And I always knew I wanted to do radio and so sucking up all this knowledge that I possibly could. And the thing is, it actually paid off. I mean, the jobs that I got out of college, I was prepared for it. I had the skills, but I got them in part because people who were 20 years older than I were hiring, and they knew that I knew the things that they knew. I knew the music, and I knew the movies, and I knew the references, and I could seamlessly sort of fit in. And I worry that a lot of students who are graduating, getting into the world, have bosses who are 40, 45 years old, and there's not going to be a connection between them whatsoever. And this plays into a larger piece. I did a lecture, actually a lecture pre-school year for the CSP students. On it was actually on comedy and parody and comedy, but I turned it into a bigger thing too about this loss of the monoculture and the ability for people to relate across generations or even across rooms at times with what they know and what they've seen and what they listen to. And I think it's a problem.
Yeah.
I'm interested in hearing what you guys think about that. And I also point out that that's the reason I'm wearing my Alf shirt.
There you go. Yeah.
Which Alf is your favorite show of all time?
No, it's not. But it
you know
is,
quite a bit about Alf.
I've seen every episode multiple times. I just went through and watched all 90 whatever episodes over the past 2 years.
Yeah.
So if you're going back into Alf, it's the first 2 seasons that you want to get to.
Worth watching.
And because by seasons 3 and 4, NBC figured out that kids loved Alf. And so the rough edges and sort of the alcoholic Alf and the Alf who wanted to eat cats, they made them cut that out.
But that was about
he disappeared.
That was about the time that the Saturday morning cartoon got started.
So 3 and 4 are kind of tame, and the other reason is because no one can know Alf exists or his cover is blown. So you really exhaust your plot ideas with the same 4 people in the same house after you get past 45, 46 episodes.
You just put him in a costume that's just a mustache and a coat.
They did
just
that.
say, well, nobody knows.
I've seen images of the trench coat, fedora.
He went to a Halloween party and stuck a zipper on himself. So he looked like he was in an Alf costume.
No, so basically what you're advocating for, and feel free to correct me on this, is cultural literacy as something that helps you in both a professional way and a personal way, right? And creating these connections with others.
Yeah, in a cultural way. We don't know. Use the royal we here. We don't know what. I don't think we know what we're missing out on right now until 20 years from now.
Yes, agreed.
Yes. We're not going to realize that no one has seen. Not everyone's seen Wayne's World, or not everyone's seen Goodfellas, or pick your favorite touchstone. In 20 years, look, I know people love these DC.
Marvel movies.
I have no time for them.
Yes,
that's about the only thing right now that's sort of and the NFL. Those are the 2 things, and it goes so deep. I was saying for a while that despite the fact that we're getting fragmented and people are watching different things. I said at one point, what brings us together? Commercials. We all, no matter what we're watching, we all see the same commercials for Liberty Mutual or for Geico. And we can't even say that's true anymore because you have these micro-targeted ads that because you said a keyword in your kitchen last night, you see one ad and someone's going to see a different ad, and you can't even say that cuts across.
Especially when you have the power to curate your own entertainment. And, so I was actually reading an article about something similar to this. It was this... I guess kind of takedown in the New Atlantic of, gosh, why am I forgetting his name? Jon Stewart. Of Jon Stewart and The Daily Show. And basically sort of what the article argued is that, 1999, peak news was sort of the tipping point where we did sort of lose the monoculture, partially because, and the article blames TiVo, which I think is an interesting thing to blame.
That's a weird
for it. But they argue news specifically was something that was supposed to be universally appealing, right? Because you're trying to acquire as much of a market share as possible. You have shows like Crossfire, right, which kind of make a big show out of being bipartisan, and you've got 2 people having a debate, and the great moment of Jon Stewart's career is when he went on Crossfire and chewed out Tucker Carlson, a younger, more libertarian Tucker Carlson, who then took that very personally and did a lot with what he had to say, but.
True.
There's Jon Stewart basically took the monoculture and was like, actually, this is all phony. He really a big part of his action was to say, as somebody outside of this system, very haughtily, we're going to criticize this thing that we all consider to be just the norm, right? And eventually, it resulted in, one of his big heroes was Roger Ailes, and he has said so on multiple occasions. Like Roger Ailes is one of the great, one of his great heroes. By taking something that was sort of this universal, this thing that everybody it was milquetoast, yes, and nobody was held accountable because nothing was recorded and et cetera. But at the very least, we all kind of held it in common And then, Roger Ailes was like, no, actually, I think I'm just going to serve one demographic and it's going to be on cable. And Stewart was like, this is genius. Like, that's what I'm doing. I'm just serving one demographic, except for it's just college-educated Democrats. And like, that's just what we're about. And then it just slowly but surely resulted in this fragmentation, kind of like the article argued that it was both of them. And I don't know if this necessarily applies to, everything here when it comes to the monoculture, but I think cable, TiVo, the ability to not necessarily have to sit and watch something live, the ability to not necessarily have to watch uncurated content. The content is, something that it's dictated for you. You pick what you want to see. You pick what you want to do. The ads are targeted towards you. Slowly but surely, that eventually results in the algorithm, micro-targeting.
Yeah, I mean, there's two perspectives in my mind on this. One of them is, if you think about like late night television, right? You had the kings, right? The core demographics. You had like the late night Johnny Carson, right? Like everybody watched it, right? And then slowly fragments. You've got a wider variety. People are leaving, when Jay Leno comes on and all that jazz. But at the end of the day, what we've ended up with is 12 different people doing the late night show that nobody watches. And, that monoculture has just sort of dissipated from that angle. But the other thing for me is, I would say, the nichening, right? Everything is so specific when it comes to content curated just for you, right? Like if you go on YouTube and you want to watch something, you're not generally, I would say, unless you're younger, most people our age and above are watching the specific things that they are interested in on YouTube, right? Yep. And maybe each one of those videos has 300,000 views, but that's not a huge demographic. That is you and your individual creator and you and this other guy and the 300 other closest friends, quote unquote, that are not really in community, just sort of hanging out together. Yeah. And so, take that, extrapolate it to every website, every social media platform, it just keeps going and fragments further and further.
Yeah. So are you under the impression that, what are some of the things that you think have resulted from that? That, like, what are the ills that you're attempting to identify?
One of the points that I made in this lecture that I gave was, because it was about parody. Parody is one of those things, humor, parody is one of those things that really harm, because parody works when people know something deep in their soul.
Yes.
And a lot of people know something deep in their soul. Even something like Naked Gun, playing off the cop movies and Dirty Harry and things. Without the frame of reference, it's not as funny.
Yeah.
When you look at, again, Weird Al and his parody success, although he was also successful, I should say, as a original sort of pastiche artist too. But his parodies are successful because those songs penetrated virtually every American, everybody. Beat It, and Like a Virgin, and Bad, and Smells Like Teen Spirit. Yeah. Everybody knew those songs. Now, his last album was 2014, Mandatory Fun.
Mandatory Fun.
Went to number one. First comedy album in 50 years, whatever, to go to number one. And he has not put out another album since, which he said at the time he didn't want to put out any more albums. He hasn't even put out any songs, essentially, since. And I think that people thought at the time that his problem was a distribution problem, meaning, internet and YouTube and people are getting to things more quickly, and he's got to wait 2 years till he gets 12 songs to put on an album. And I think the problem is much more the fact that the songs he would want to parody, he has no sense of the audience that actually would understand. Even on the last album, there are songs there that I'm not sure a vast majority of his
his audience would even really know.
No.
Yeah, that's actually kind of funny, because in my mind I've always just thought of Weird Al as someone who's very adaptive. Incredibly adaptive, right? He's like one of the first big supporters of Funny or Die. Like was really into early internet sketch comedy. I feel like his most recent quote unquote biopic is a good indication of this, that he still kind of like understands what people are going to find funny. He's rolling with the punches.
The fact that Daniel Radcliffe was, cast just shows that he understands the internet zeitgeist.
In a certain capacity, right? Yeah. And so, I don't think that could possibly be the explanation that he's some sort of, he's out of touch. He doesn't understand the blows of the industry anymore. It's like, no, there's probably, he just doesn't have the same kind of material / he can't reach the same nerve that he used to be able to.
And I want to, there's a lot of layers here, and I'm not saying we want to go back to a time where you had one newspaper and couldn't read any newspaper in the country. You had 3 television stations, and then old Fox comes along, and you got PBS, and those are your choices. Or you've got to watch, Meatballs for the 87th time because that's the only thing.
The
that's
censored
on
version of
That's
Meatballs.
it. That's all that's available. And yet, it's a little romantic in me, but when, the great thing, because I still do this, the great thing about reading a physical newspaper is you don't know what you're going to find.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're going to be attracted to, and you don't know what's going to pop out at you. And the same thing about reading a magazine, a physical magazine, is you just don't know. Great writers can make you read almost anything. Kevin Williamson, who was with National Review for a long time, and is over at Dispatch now.
Yeah.
Just an amazingly, incredibly talented writer. He
a hell of a personality. He's an odd guy.
he had a cover story in National Review on Puerto Rico's debt crisis.
Yeah.
I'm not going to read about Puerto Rico's debt crisis. And of course I read about Puerto Rico's debt crisis because he wrote it.
Yeah.
But you just never know. And so you lose a little bit of that too. So everything's curated, and you go to YouTube and there's 12 videos, and they know that you searched on this, and so they're going to pop it up to you. It's, again, I don't want to say it's unalloyed bad.
Yeah.
We're not going to go back. We have all this information in the palm of our hand on a phone, and yet everything has a price.
Yes.
Everything has a price.
For being able to find out exactly what the lead singer of Smash Mouth said, we have traded the, an ability, like the actual tangible experience. And the funny thing is actually another thing that this article mentioned that I hadn't really thought about in full depth, because I remember when I was in high school was when everybody was going through the hand-wringing of the death of print, right? And then, by the time I reached college, it was like officially it's over. This is dead and gone. But part of what sustained local newspapers and allowed like local newspaper journalism to happen, and even to a certain extent national subscriber bases, is just like somebody wanting to know if the Packers won last night, right? Like it was a universal thing. Like it was just a part of the way that you processed information. And now, since you can just look up whether or not the Packers won last night, that's just something that it's no longer a part of the system. A lot of the people who bought those papers didn't really care about the Iran-Contra scandal. They really didn't care. Even though we like to kind of place a certain level of austerity to the local newspaper as this great institution.
Heavily romanticized.
For the average reader, that wasn't what it was about. They weren't there for the news. They were there for the horoscopes.
That's a pretty cynical reading, but with whatever data to back it up, who knows? To sort of go off what Scott was saying earlier, you're reading a thing because personality writes it, right? And you see it in the National Review, and you're like, oh, I would never actually consume this, but now that this person has written it, that's being exposed to something new, right, through that same platform because of its width. I find on a platform like YouTube, which I consume a lot of.
Yes.
a lot of YouTube.
Yes.
Ostensibly, there's new content being churned out there all of the time, but I see the same stuff over and over again, right? Yeah. It finds what I'd like, and then the width just
Your
disappears.
Aperture.
Exactly.
Yes, the
right?
aperture is totally different.
I'm not being exposed to a wide variety of content to find out new things I might be interested in nearly as much as, say if I had 4 channels to select through that I would just go through and just whatever catches my eyes, like I guess I'm going to watch that. Who knows, I may like it, I may not. But at least I was exposed to it and I had that chance, right? Now, it's give and take because obviously I would rather not have to do that. To be honest, I do prefer to have something know exactly what I like, but there is something lost there.
Yeah,
you
you go from watching 60 minutes to these gosh dang snakes on these flippin' planes, or yippee-ki-yay, mother monkey, television movies. That's something that our generation has no tolerance for. Absolutely no tolerance for.
Not at all.
But so, do you think that the one thing that kind of jumped out to me about your initial explanation there that I'm curious about is that, it's true. We kind of are post monoculture in a lot of ways. We don't kind of share the same stuff in the way that we did before. But do you think that part of the reason why you kind of value that specific era is just purely a nostalgic thing, where it might be easier for you to cast a little bit of a wider net of what's essential because it's something that you have more of a personal relationship with?
Well, I want people to know what I'm talking about. I think that part of my concern is that sort of getting to what Dylan was talking about is children, young adults in that age don't even have the opportunity to, if they wanted to. You've got to put the effort in. You've got to do the research and find out, all right, what was popular? What was the number one? It's not fed to you in the same way as your curated content is. And so even if you wanted to sort of see, these are the most popular, although Friends is doing okay, I guess.
Yeah. Somehow. Somehow.
Who knows why?
But, you don't have the easy touches to see those things that were happening just before you were conscious, just before you were aware of what was happening. And the ability to access that, the ability to access it is probably better than it's ever been.
Yes.
If you're on Hulu or YouTube or just reference materials again on the web, it's probably easier than ever to see things. But the curation of what you should know, what should be put in front of you, what might be, I say useful, but what might be something that you'll want to talk about with someone else.
There's this thing that I don't know if there's probably an official term for it. But like I would consider it to be like the phantom reference or something. A good example of this would be like they still put Matrix references and allusions into children's movies, right? Bullet time scenes, like using motifs from the soundtrack, and these movies are starting to be pushed towards people who definitely weren't alive when the Matrix came out and whatnot. And so and they're just so entrenched in the zeitgeist, but there's no way for anybody to really access it because this is something that's culturally totally separate.
And yet, as I said, there's a lot of layers here. And yet, I'm also of the belief that so much of all of that stuff is so ethereal. It's gone. There's a great conversation. I look at this quote often. Two of my favorite people, Conan O'Brien and Albert Brooks, who you guys know who Albert Brooks is. All right, good.
Yes.
Otherwise, I was going to have to give you a little YouTube tutorial.
Okay, will do. If the essay's got to be at least 5 hours long. I'm not going to watch it.
That's the new thing now. Is YouTube essays are 2-3 hours long.
So Conan and Albert Brooks were talking.
Yeah.
And Conan was saying to Albert Brooks, he's like, you're brilliant. You're this great writer and this amazing actor, and the stuff that you do is going to live forever. And I just do this rinky-dink talk show. It's on 5 days a week and late at night, and no one's going to remember, the show, and it's on and it's gone. And Albert Brooks turns to, and Conan was the one telling the story. And Albert Brooks turns to Conan and goes, "What? Are you kidding me? This is all nothing. This is nothing. Nothing we do matters. Nothing at all." I mean, Cary Grant was the biggest actor in the country, in the world, and nobody thinks of Cary Grant.
There's a Cary
days.
Grant movie being played upstairs right now.
But I think about this every Christmas when Bing Crosby comes around, Holiday Inn and White Christmas. And I mean, if you look back, nobody was bigger than Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby was insanely popular on stage and screen and music. The guy was just omnipresent and huge. And nobody thinks of Bing Crosby these days. Nobody thinks of Bing Crosby. So in some way, all these things fade. It's like someone needs to capture them before they go.
Yeah. Is there? Do you think there's a part of this involving like an X factor that, because there's plenty of counterexamples, right? There would be the biggest man in the world, right? An equivalent of a Bing Crosby would say be like an Elvis, for like a brief
You've
period.
got like one, right?
Yeah.
Elvis, even
Elvis, the
these
Beatles.
days.
Well, okay, so I was about to say this is a controversial take, but I think we're like 2 generations away from the Beatles not being
Not even 2.
Yeah,
Not even 2.
I mean, I was being conservative with 2.
It's possible. It's a very popular thing in our age group to say that they suck. That's a really popular thing,
which is crazy to me, but cool. But cool.
But it because I don't know, maybe right now we're just living really strongly in like era defining nostalgia, like back when the monoculture sort of did exist. And the reason why I kind of mentioned this nostalgia thing is there's this consistent thing right now where content that's being remade or revitalized.
Intellectual property.
It's very focused on a very specific era of pop culture.
Yes.
Right. They're still making Ghostbusters movies.
Yeah.
Like why?
Magnum PI.
Magnum
Night
PI.
Court's bad.
Yeah. They
Stranger Things.
They brought back Fletch. And I
Which
love
is-
Fletch.
yeah.
But I John Hamm as Fletch in like a Paramount Plus original television show. It's like this doesn't make any sense to me. But for a very specific, I think that those kind of that generation, sort of the.
Which
like,
reminds me,
late
actually,
boomer
have you guys seen the trailer for Mel Brooks' History of the World Part 2?
I did not
No.
see it.
Yeah, they're doing Part 2.
I saw it silently, and I said I can't bring myself to watching it.
I don't know. The version that I saw had Mel Brooks introduce it. So, I mean, he's all about it. I guarantee it's going to suck. I guarantee it's not good. I mean, poor guy.
The first person who came up was Taika Waititi, and I was like, there's no way.
The first one that came up for me was, stoner comedy guy, Seth
Rogen.
Seth Rogen, yeah. Which, same reaction on that, yeah.
This is no Gene Wilder.
No,
certainly
no
not. Gene Wilder. But yeah, no, we kind of, because there isn't really a monoculture anymore, the last kind of existent one, we're kind of slaves to it in a weird way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? Where we keep, Star Wars.
It's the
Ghostbusters.
only consistent from a financial perspective, right? If you look at it from those producing the quote unquote art, right? Those producing that art, they look at the graphs and they say, well, there's only a surefire IP, and it's this demographic of people that still hold this monoculture,
Top
right?
Gun.
Yeah,
It's Beverly Hills Cops.
exactly.
Yeah,
they're making a Rush Hour 3?
No, 4.
It's 4. Yeah,
It's 4. Oh, the Rush Hour, though, is a little later than.
It's true. That's
later
like
than
90s,
that.
early 2000s.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's
I don't
early
know.
2000s.
But
yeah, it is strange. It is strange. It's Stranger Things.
Oh.
But there, actually a good example of this is somebody who we all know personally. It's Dr. Berzer, Bradley Berzer, who his social media presence and like his work with like Spirit of Cecilia and stuff, a lot of his websites. He's very much he's really strongly in that mind space. He was like, this actually, this was when culture was last good, and I'm really going to focus on this, right? He loves Stranger Things, and and that's a big part of it. He's like, it reminds me of when I was a kid. I'm really into this, and I suppose that his, demographic has a real strong grasp on sort of what people decide to rate. But it's odd stuff. Like Ghostbusters Afterlife is a good example of this, where, the death of Harold Ramis, very tragic. He was a great man. Except for Year Zero, or what was it called? Year One? Was it Year One or
The
Year
one
Zero?
with
Jack Black and Michael Cera.
Yeah. That was unfortunate.
Yes,
Yeah,
this is his last feature film. But
which that's always tragic. That the last feature film is always one that everybody looks back and says that was
John Candy.
yes,
Yeah.
Canadian bacon.
yeah. Well, also, the Zucker brothers are a good
Dragon's
example
East.
of this.
Yeah.
The Zucker brothers,
because they had that
they did the Scary Movie movies as well.
But they were fractured by that point. I mean,
Yeah.
it was one Zucker.
Yeah.
yeah. I thought the last one they did was that like Bush era propaganda film.
The Christmas, there was an American Carol. I think.
Yes. Yes.
Where it was about the sort of like 9/11 panic.
It was sending Michael Moore back in time to
Yes.
learn about America.
Yes.
If I remember properly.
Which, on paper, is a great concept.
So, look, here's the thing. Here's the thing, Scott. What you were saying about learning about the references and understanding things to comport yourself. I too have. To be a broadcaster, you must be as wide as an ocean, but as shallow as a puddle. But for Ghostbusters Afterlife, there's this really extended scene at the end that they sort of bring back like a CGI Harold Ramis, and he winks at the camera and he's like, an old and very fat Ernie Hudson and Bill Murray and
they all say heartfelt
Dan
goodbyes.
Aykroyd. They all say heartfelt goodbyes, and like all the characters are like Egon's son or daughter, or like granddaughter, I think is one of them is Egon's granddaughter and stuff. And you're going through all this and you're thinking to yourself, is this for the reported demographic of who should be watching this movie? This is supposed to be like, we're bringing the Ghostbusters into the 21st century. This is for the kids. And you're watching, you're like, I don't think the kids have, Harold Ramis, great guy, but I don't think the kids really care about who Harold Ramis is. And so it seems like that's kind of where the focus is remember this guy? Although the people have made so much hay about the member berries thing. The remember this guy, remember that.
Yeah,
remember
true.
Ghostbusters, but
It's like that Chris Farley sketch. Yeah, I remember when you were part of the Beatles. Classic. All right. real quick,
Yes.
as we move into the next step of the conversation, we got to take a quick break to thank our patrons, right? Thank you all so much for helping support the show. We could not do it without you. I want to shout out our top patrons, that being Zach and Amber Strehle, Joe Papalardo, and Sammy Roberts. Y'all are carrying this podcast on the sweat of your brow or on your broken back. I don't know.
Yeah.
Something like that. I'm mixing the metaphors here. If you're interested in supporting the show, $1 a week. No, $1 a month. Yeah, I was about to say that's too expensive for what we offer. $1 a month, you get to see the episode early. $5 a month, you get the exclusive post show, which is only on Patreon.
Yes,
which is uncensored, which for the last few episodes has meant nothing.
Yeah,
but who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
This could be the time. The $10 tier, you can ask us questions. Right, and we'll answer them on the podcast. And we've got questions right here on my phone.
Okay,
from our patrons. First one is from Joe Papalardo. This one is specifically for Scott.
Oh boy,
what is your most controversial music take? And I think we could come in on this as well.
I have I've grown out of some of my controversial music takes. One would be that David Bowie is overrated.
Yeah.
And we did a big show on him.
Yes.
And I have to admit that in my mind, I saw David Bowie as two things. One is being like the shape-shifting, trend-chasing chameleon.
Yes.
And then I really knew him probably best around that Let's Dance era, which actually is not one of his best albums or anywhere close to his best.
Yeah.
So getting a fuller picture of his discography was enlightening. So that's not on it. It might be that Eric Clapton sucks.
Yes, this is a consistent thing that you guys mention on the show.
Yeah.
How much you hate Eric Clapton.
Yeah, except for Derek and the Dominoes.
Yes.
That album, inspired by George Harrison's wife.
Yes.
Who he eventually got.
Yeah.
And then divorced.
Yeah.
But Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs is
a great,
a perfect album.
It's a perfect album.
But the stuff beforehand is
okay.
His solo stuff is largely, I don't want to say embarrassing, but it's not good. And from a technical perspective, I'm sure he's a great guitar player, but he's never moved me as a guitar player.
Famously, he almost quit because of Hendrix, which I think is a really strong indication.
Yeah, interesting.
Where Hendrix sort of had this emotional X factor, like he could really he had something that was it was resonant about the way that he played. Eric, very technical, but I think I might agree with you on that. I'm not as super familiar with the depths of his discography, so I can't make that sort of claim. I don't know. I guess for me, I suppose it's not like a super controversial thing, but I don't believe in guilty pleasures. I don't think they exist. I think that you can
like a guilty pleasure band is not you saying like, oh, I know it's bad. It's like you would have to believe it is good in order to enjoy it.
No, I just think that like something being bad is actually a perfectly legitimate reason to enjoy it.
You don't have to make excuses.
You don't have to make excuses.
Yeah.
Right. I used to.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
What?
If I came to you and said my favorite band is Imagine Dragons, man, I love Imagine Dragons. Well, you would think less of me.
No, I would think you have bad taste.
Okay.
Right? But you're not saying, oh man, you know who my guilty pleasure is? Imagine Dragons. Like, no, there's something that's appealing about them to you. If there's somebody that you're willing to make your guilty pleasure.
Yeah. To be fair to those with the guiltiest of pleasures, Imagine Dragons. Maybe there's a particular aspect that you like about their music, right?
Yeah.
It has some sort of like memory attached to it. It's emotionally resonant to you, and you acknowledge that it's bad. But you like that particular part
I know,
of it.
But that doesn't make it a guilty
pleasure.
pleasure.
But isn't that the definition of a guilty pleasure? I don't know.
We can parse this out. This is why it's controversial.
There you go.
But what about you? Controversial music take? Are you gonna bring anything to the floor here?
I was gonna say something about Imagine Dragons, but I can't really talk about that anymore. But let's try to. I'm gonna try to because we got a lot of questions this time around, so I want to try to get through as many as possible. This is another question from Joe Papalardo, which is, how is your career path different, if at all, from the entertainment careers like comedy or acting? Was success as uncertain for you?
Well, I don't know the doors you have to walk through to do comedy and acting. Although, in both places, you've got to have an incredible amount of self-confidence. I mean, you have to, and this goes to, speak universally, but probably just about everyone has to have a pretty healthy ego to think that people want to hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to have that thing inside of you that says, no, you should listen to me.
Yeah.
I have something to say about this. It's
Yeah.
important. And so I think that probably crosses all of those. The difference, I'd say one of the big differences between sort of my path and stand-up comedy actor is it's a little more team-based.
Yes.
Certainly if you're an actor, you rely on others around you, but people evaluate you very much on, your
metrics.
performance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Stand-up, you're up there all alone. I've actually had some thoughts of, probably not at this point, but, I've had some thoughts of maybe doing stand-up.
Yeah.
But again, probably not at this point. But, as part of a radio show, at least when they used to have multiple people on a show and producers,
Yeah.
you really are part of a team.
Yes.
It's a team effort to get the show on every day. It's a team effort to put your best foot forward. What I would say about the path, so this is just honest to God truth, is I always knew what I wanted to do, and I always knew how I was going to do it. And so my senior year of college, took the train downtown, had an interview for an internship with ESPN 1000 in Chicago. And I got the internship. And I distinctly remember sitting on the train on the way home and thinking, well, okay,
We're it.
I've got it now.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, we're locked in.
This is it.
Yeah.
I've got the internship. I'm going to do great
Yeah.
because I know I'm great.
Yeah.
I know what I can do, and
Yeah.
they're going to see what I can do, and that's it. This
Yeah.
was the most important
You're
thing
gonna
I had to do in my life.
produce the best packages. You're gonna, that was all a walk in the park.
Look, it was kind of true.
Yeah.
I mean,
There you go. Yeah.
That the path didn't go exactly the way I thought it would, but the doors that opened through that happened in the same manner.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The small boy within you that had these great plans, you saw the path and it fell within that path.
Yeah.
Right. Which is great.
And there is, I think, a less of especially if you're okay working sort of in local markets, I feel like becoming a television actor is the equivalent of, say, becoming a Howard Stern or an Opie and Anthony or, a Rush Limbaugh, right? Like, there's people, national premier, level broadcasters, and that's sort of more like the X Factor thing, knowing the right guy, getting in the right elevator sort of situation, being at the right dinner party. That a lot of people
And also being very good.
yes, but also being very good.
That also has to be a part of it.
And
Yes.
and it's the same thing for those. What do you want to sacrifice? Or it might not be the right word, but
Yeah.
you want to live somewhere you don't really want to live for a while. You want to make money you don't really want to make for a while. Do you want to work really strange hours and maybe not have kids really or young? And what in what order do you put that importance? And how far do you go until you say, well, maybe it's not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
All those variables are kind of similar, I suppose.
Agreed. I got another question from Sammy Roberts, right?
Gotcha.
Sammy Roberts says, for Monomaniacs and guest, is baseball still the great American pastime? If not, what is, or rather what should be?
So you are a legitimate baseball fan.
Yeah.
But baseball is sort of on the ropes right now in a lot of ways. So what's your metric on this?
It's the phrasing. Is the great American pastime? Probably yes. Great American game? Probably football. Baseball has. They're working on it, right? One of the problems is it's become a real regional sport.
Yeah.
Baseball does incredibly well in the individual markets. In
Yes.
Kansas City, the Royals are huge.
Yeah.
New York City
ratings wise
is a great example of this.
Yeah.
all the markets, most of the markets in Oakland and some others, maybe not so much, but most of the markets are very strong supporters. The ratings on the radio are good. Ratings on TV are good. Everything's good. On a national stage, you have problems. Your most marketable stars are shown 4 times a game.
Yeah.
Like 4 at-bats a game.
Yeah.
The most marketable star in the game plays in California on a team that never makes the playoffs and doesn't really want to be the face of the sport.
Yeah.
Which is okay, but then someone else has to, and right, and so there are problems there. There are problems with.
Yeah.
I denied it for a while, but look, there's no doubt now that I have kids of my own who watch baseball. There's no doubt pace of play is ridiculous.
Yes.
It's not length of game; it's pace of play.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the electronic umpires and the sort of
the
average at bat now is somewhere in the 4 or 5 minutes mark.
I don't know what that number is, but it's too long.
Yeah.
And they're trying to address that with potentially adding a pitch clock. And I was anti-pitch clock for a long time.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a better option at this point.
I mean, it's against the spirit of the game, but it might be.
Yeah, I would either put a hard cap on the number of pitchers on a roster, so you can't go through these games where you have 6 pitchers and one. I know they try to do this, but you have to face at least 3 batters in an inning. But still, I would, and that would also adjust the game back to where starters matter, because now so much of the game, no one throws 200 innings anymore. And so you've sort of lost that luster of this guy versus this guy, and they're going to go 7 innings at least, and it's going to be a duel, and that's fading away too. So there are issues. They changed the schedule this year, which I'm not sure is going to work in their advantage, where you play fewer games against your own division, you play more games against the rest of the league. And
is that the hope to try to increase the national appeal?
Partly, and so that you see the other players more often when they come to town. So there's a little bit of that. So look, it's a fraught time because they in one sense because they have problems, but in the other sense because they really are, I think, trying to address them.
Yeah.
And they really are trying to do things that might help some of the issues.
Yeah.
The NFL, as we talked about earlier, is doing okay.
Yeah. Well, they got to get the refereeing figured out.
But I mean, it was like 93 of the top 100 shows on TV in 2022 were football games, were NFL games.
Yeah.
And Super Bowl is the one thing in the course of the year that is able to bring people together and actually have a huge majority of the country tune in and watch. And injuries haven't stopped them, and whatever blowback from Black Lives Matter or the social aspect hasn't stopped them, and I don't see it stop. What would stop the NFL?
Are you going to be put on a list if you say this?
No. What would stop? I mean, honestly, what would stop the NFL or slow the NFL is horrid quarterback play.
Yes.
And they're actually in a spot right now. My friend and I, shout out to Tim, we always do these lists and back and forth, and usually we rank the quarterbacks before the season in tiers, and the Athletic does this too, but we did it first. So tier 1, tier 2, 3. And he's like, let's do it now after the season with tiers. And I'm like, okay, Patrick Mahomes, super elite tier. Then Josh Allen, and who else? There's one other guy that's in that. Burrow, probably in that next tier. And then you start really getting questions. Aaron Rodgers this year looked like he really was 39 years old or 40 years old, and you probably have. There are some young guys that really have to take. Trevor Lawrence has to become a star. Justin Fields in Chicago really has to become a star. Two or three of the guys they draft this year, because you have a lot of teams like the Tennessee Titans starting a guy they signed off the street 6 weeks ago. And that's their best choice because the other guys on the roster are so bad. And poor quarterback play in which the offenses can't move. The whole thing about the NFL is the NFL realized that fans like scoring. And this is what baseball is hopefully learning from. They changed rules and prioritized ways in which scoring would go up. Pass interference penalties and illegal contact penalties down the field. And they also realized, hey, when your quarterback breaks a collarbone every other year and is out for 12 games,
bad for
business. Stop landing on our quarterbacks. And I know that people don't like the roughing the passer calls, and I would agree there are some that are more or less egregious than others, but the one that says, you can't land on the quarterback with all your weight anymore, that's specifically because guys like Tony Romo and Aaron Rodgers were breaking collarbones and were out for 3/4 of the year. And they said, we can't have this. We can't have poor quarterbacks.
That's why my little brother doesn't play anymore. He broke both of his collarbones. He was a quarterback. It was wildly consistent.
So concussions didn't stop them, and head injuries nothing.
What was it? What was the
quarterback play?
What was that movie where
I think it was
Will
just
Smith
concussion.
Oh
I think it was
the kind of ridiculous Nigerian accent the whole time. It's kind of a strange film.
They've done a lot. It's not perfect, but you compare the safety I'm going to go way too deep at this point.
Yeah.
Compare the safety now to 10 years ago, and there's a huge difference in concussions and head injuries and stopping games to pull people out. I mean, it happens.
We just had a very high-profile injury in the NFL, though, just very recently.
Well, with DeMar Hamlin, but that's totally see that Hamlin injury, and we'll learn more as
time goes on.
Reports come out, but that is an injury that could have happened in this room right now.
Yes, it was definitely a freak accident.
Right, it's not a football. I want to say it's not football related. He was playing football, but it's not a football specific injury that he suffered.
It didn't stop people in the alternative sports press from claiming that was the case.
So that's a really
really?
It's a really long answer to the question.
Yeah,
will do.
I think,
but the question is, should baseball be America's pastime, or should football remain America's pastime?
Yeah.
Or
there's a difference.
I don't think there's any way around.
Yeah.
Football also has the magic of being, it's just, my son's 9 now, and we're in this rhythm. Football has this amazing, baseball is an everyday rhythm, and it's relentless, and there's something special about that. You've got to be good every day. But football's rhythm of once a week, and there's Sunday and Sunday night, and then there's Monday night. You get a couple days off to reflect, but then one day to preview, and you're already back on Thursday.
And the games aren't like a million years long, and you can set your whole
watch
day around
multiple
them.
games in a day, and it's more of an event because it becomes less consistently. Right, in my opinion, at the very least.
Yeah. I feel like actually, weirdly enough, one of my weirdest pet peeves with baseball is the unlimited salaries. I don't know if
salary cap.
Yeah, the lack of a salary cap.
It doesn't bother me.
Yeah, really. Okay. I don't know.
I think the thing that would fix baseball would be to legalize drugs.
Yeah. Bring back the Barry Bonds years, right?
Classically,
there's a lot of people who claim that, but so the reason I'm saying this is that part of the reason I think like the Yankees are always going to always be good is because of the salary cap, lack of a salary cap, and like the Knicks would murder to have that sort of. Excuse me, not the Knicks. The Nets would murder to have that kind of opportunity, right? For if the NBA was big in the Big Apple, then people would love it. They would absolutely, it would be amazing for the league and all that stuff. But just when a franchise isn't able to fully develop itself, then you can actually kind of have that difference there.
Baseball has a de facto salary cap with the luxury tax, and it's pretty onerous at this point. And that's why the players don't want it. The players don't want a cap. Why the players want a cap? The players want it, right?
To barely play a sport for millions and millions.
That was part of what the strike was about this past year, the lockout strike, whatever it was. I actually already forget. But part of that was about where the cap was, how quickly it moved up. So that luxury tax is actually a de facto cap on salary spending for most teams.
It's odd because it means that it's one of the few sports in America professionally that has like a developed middle class. Like you can be a middle class professional baseball player in a way you can't do with hockey, you can't do with basketball. Normally you have to go to a foreign market to be like a middle. You have to play in Russia, or try to play in Russia to get caught with CBD. But I was actually the other day I was researching specifically. I went through quite the rabbit hole. I had a fever and I was reading a lot of things, but I got into specifically Israeli local basketball leagues and the various like sports clubs and the leagues that they have, and very often, that's a classic thing for Americans to go and do. Right, the Israeli league pays well. You go to, the Maccabi Club in Tel Aviv, and you just kick all of Europe's, collective behind about 2 or 3 times a year, and you just make a ton of money, and you live in a relatively cheap place, right? And it's just a really effective way to do that. With baseball though, you can do that by playing for actual, feeder teams. You don't have to go to Tel Aviv to do so.
Agreed.
Also, they have hockey in Israel. I found this out. So
why wouldn't they?
Yeah, no, it's just it's funny to me. It's a whole country of. Imagine if every team was the Coyotes. I almost wore my Coyotes hat today. Actually,
you and your Americentrism over there. Dude.
Yeah, right, right. All right.
How are we doing on time? By the way,
we're doing on time. We're good. How much time do we have though?
Oh
gosh!
We have reached our time. Holy smokes!
That happened too quickly.
Yeah,
we wanted to come back to the topic at hand. We always try to kind of sandwich conversation about
I think I did the questions a little too late.
You may have finished the questions a little too late, but so I guess we got to kind of wrap up, move into the Patreon. If you can stick around for it, we'll record one regardless, folks. But before we go, feel free to plug, etc. I know that as far as the splash that we can make. It's nothing compared to the actual properties that you were a part of. But I will ask everybody here who hasn't already to check out Political Beats, a National Review podcast, as well as the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour. You can find it on every major streaming service. And is there anything else that you would think is worth mentioning?
Those are the big ones.
Those are the big ones.
There you go. The big ones.
Yes.
If you could pick two things, that would be it. So
that would be it. So what's next for, just for the sake, if you're comfortable releasing this information, what's next for Political Beats?
We've been pretty clear. I always try to think whether or not we've said something or not released, but Tool is going to be.
Whoa,
that's cool.
This is one that it's pretty new for me.
Yeah, so I was going to say that.
Excited right now.
Well, so the reason I would say that is because I've always felt like I was always thinking to myself, is there any time are these guys going to really start moving into, I guess the way I would describe it would be heavier music, and and Tool is not especially heavy, but I always wondered if that was going to be a direction you guys
It's
ever
heavier
went.
than most of the stuff.
Yes,
true.
Exactly. It's heavier than Steely Dan.
By a little bit of a margin.
Are you willing to reveal who the guest is?
I can't because we don't release the guest until after we do the actual taping, so I can't.
I'd be very curious to know who signed up for Tool.
And then I think we might do My Morning Jacket.
Oh, okay.
You know them?
Yes, I know.
I think that might be next.
That sounds like a Jeff pick.
It's not.
Really?
Yeah. It's me.
Wow. Okay.
Wow.
And
you said that with so much
gravitas.
Gravitas and sadness too.
Yeah.
It's me. It's me. I was the one who liked My Morning Jacket.
Whoa.
Oh gosh, there goes the headphone.
Well, the headphones apparently.
Well, I guess that's as good a time as any to call it.
Yeah, I guess so. That makes sense. All right, sounds good. We'll see you all on the Patreon. Bye.